Hello everyone. Welcome to season 3 of Drone Wars. Man, oh my goodness. I feel like it's just last week we just finished season 2. Oh wait, we did finish season 2 last week. That was fun. Alright, feel free to bring people in, ask people to join us. It's gonna be fun. We have so much to cover in this new season. There is so much stuff. Just to give you an idea, I have 2 Illustrator documents and I have like 4 different pages I have to show you guys, which is a lot. Yeah, feel free to spread the word if you want more people to actually like learn about this. This video here, this stream, I'm going to keep this video on YouTube so that way you can show it to people and they can understand exactly how Season 3 is going to work. And I'm going to show you guys everything. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and just exit the game here. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to display capture. Just like so. Okay. And that way what I can do is I can actually just close this and we can actually begin looking at this official Season 3 document. Now in Season 3 here, you're going to have this document. This will be shared to you guys on the Discord. Now, before I get into this, the Discord has had a lot of major changes. On the Discord, you can see there's so many things that have actually just changed. There's a new way that the common area has like been fixed to be more, you know, user-friendly and stuff. You know, meme area has its own section. That all the Drone War stuff has its own specific section. And you'll notice that there's a category specifically for star maps. And I'll get to why star maps have their own category. That is something that we will find out later. For any of you guys that are participating as game masters, you also have your own category where you're going to be able to check ships and stuff, and that's something we'll get into later as well. Now, I believe Steel is currently streaming the this broadcast on the Discord. If you guys are in the Drone Wars Discord, I'll put a link to that in the description later. But for now, let's go ahead and dive into this document. So here in this document, there is a lot of stuff to go over. So you're gonna see this document, you're gonna have these tabs on the left. This is how you actually go through the document. You see there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, so I've organized it to be really easy to read, okay? Originally it was all in black, but I decided to add some colors to it to make it easier. Now, if you just want to skim read and don't care about the details, you can read everything in red. But we're gonna go into details here so we don't miss anything. Anything in blue is kind of an example and it's kind of just used for reference. It's so you guys can better understand what is going on and to really just clarify it. Anything in pink is just what you're not supposed to do, and you have to read it really carefully. If you have any questions, feel free to bring it to me, Steel, or any of the other game masters. And of course, I have absolute authority to add or change things in this document, and I probably will be changing things throughout the season. This document is more of an introduction, and a lot of things here are going to probably change as people find, exploits or loopholes. I'm going to have to close those up as things go along. So of course, the first thing I'm going to go into here is creating your faction. So in order to really participate in Drone Wars, you're going to need to make your own faction, okay? And your faction is going to need a couple things. For one, you're going to need a unique identity with a color scheme or symbol, and you're going to need your own fleet of ships or other vehicles. Ships aren't even mandatory anymore. You only really need around 20 to 30 minutes of free time each week. It could be any day of the week. It could be any time. Doesn't really matter. You don't really have to be there in person. You just, you get your stuff. You go to a document and you basically say, I want to do this week, and that's how it works. It's like it's almost like a game of D&D, except you don't even have to show up like all the same time. You just show up whenever you want, and you're just like, well, I want to make my character do this, and then like at the end of the week when everyone has submitted their stuff, it all just goes down. That's the way it works. Now, the cool thing about this season. Anyone's allowed to have multiple factions. The thing is, there are some rules. Your factions are not allowed to be allied with each other. You can't make multiple factions and be like, well, I'm going to make them all be at peace with each other so I can just control way more territory. No, that's not how it works. Also, when you have multiple factions, you cannot start them in the same region. So you're going to have to wait until new regions are unlocked to introduce your other factions. And it helps to spread things out and make sure that land can be evenly distributed amongst a larger group of people. Now, you are also allowed to have multiple people in the same faction if you want, and it's up to you guys to decide how that works. You guys can share, you guys can share commanding roles. You can basically say like, okay, maybe this person is in charge of controlling the fleets, while this person is in charge of controlling the economy, while this person is in charge of designing the ships. You guys can do stuff like that if you want. There's plenty of ways you can do that, but that's up to you guys to decide how you want to make that work. Now, if you scroll down here, we're going to go down to the faction identity. Now, your faction can be literally anything, as long as it's not offensive in any way. I do need to make sure I'm following, terms of service with YouTube and Twitch or whatever else I'm using to stream this on, or whatever you guys want, right? As a general guideline, I put some things here. You're not allowed to use any of the following things that are in pink there. No weird references, or innuendos, none of that stuff. Okay, don't bully people. Don't make anything super threatening. All right, don't use anything inappropriate. Right, and of course, don't base your factions off of real life regimes, countries, governments, peoples, or religions. You can use them inspiration, but like try to avoid it if you can, and please just avoid controversial groups entirely. Don't be that person. Okay, we're trying to avoid all the controversy and discrimination and try not to trigger people. We're here just to have some fun. This is a game after all. Now, you're encouraged to come up with your own lore for your factions, and you can create your own stories and characters for your faction. Just have fun and be really creative. It's like a lot of visual storytelling here, so you're literally creating your own story with this season. It's going to be very fun. And of course, you can pick any color to represent your faction on the map. You could even pick a color that's already been picked too. It'd be a little bit confusing if you're right next to someone who already has your color, but that's fine. You're gonna have a little border between you guys. You guys can tell. Now, you guys have the option to create your own faction symbol if you want that to be displayed on the map. And I have a little example of a faction symbol here. Now, you can design the faction symbol however you want as long as it follows the rules. The thing is, faction symbols are entirely optional. You don't need them at all. Your faction could just be displayed as just a color. I mean, look at that chat. Is my faction USA alright? The tag was unintentional from the full name, United Space Alliance. Yeah, I guess that's fine, yeah. As long as it's not quite literally the US, and we're all good. Now for fleets. So your factions are going to need a fleet of ships or other vehicles that you're going to be using. And you're not limited to only just normal spaceships. You can create rovers, mechs, boats, and even fortresses. Yeah, fortresses count as like parts of your fleets and stuff. So they're no longer their own separate structure. It gets really interesting. Um, Now, in terms of what your faction could be, you don't really have to be a human faction. You can play as any creature or fictional race. You can even be a machine faction if you want. There's really no restrictions to what you can play as. It's all roleplay. Now, you're allowed to use workshop creations, but you have to get the author's permission to use or re-upload modified versions of their creations, and you have to make sure to give them credit after getting their permission. I just want to make that very clear so that way we aren't just getting a bunch of people flooding the Discord and just taking a bunch of random people's stuff from the front page without asking. That's kind of important. Let me go ahead and set myself here to do not disturb. I gotta set it to streaming just so I don't get pings. There we go. Now all of your vehicles are going to be using AI blocks to battle automatically. It's the same thing as season 2, okay? So you're going to be using AI blocks to make your ships battle, and no one's actually controlling them. It's just your AI blocks in the battle. And I did provide a blueprint with some pre-made AI on the workshop for you guys to use. Now, you can make your own if you want. Those are just some examples, but you're able to make your own and mess around with it and tinker and try to make your AIs work in the way that you want your ships to battle. And there's so many different ways you can make this stuff work. Now, when your vehicle is ready, you're going to need to upload your creation to the workshop so that a game master can spawn them for battles. I'm not going to be blueprinting your ships anymore. I'm just going to be subscribing to your ships, and that helps me a lot because that helps me not use as much space on my computer, and that means that these ships can be updated in real time as well. And that makes everything a lot easier for you guys. It's so much better. Now, your vehicles are pretty much almost guaranteed to be updated throughout the entire season, so you're going to be replacing or uploading multiple versions of the same ship as you play. So you're gonna be upgrading these things. So I really recommend that you design your vehicles as shells, and then you can refit those and upgrade those as needed. It's gonna save you a lot of time and effort in the future, and I have mentioned it constantly throughout the end of the second season. Just like, please, like, stop designing full ships. Make it hollow so that way you can, like, you know, make it like easier on yourself later. because a lot of the things I'm going to be introducing here are going to be like a punch to the gut for you guys. Like, you guys are not prepared for a lot of the stuff that's going to be happening. Like, you guys are designing your ships way ahead of plan. I'll get into that soon. It's going to be insane. Okay, so for free time here, you only need 20 to 30 minutes. Um, yeah, during this time, you're just gonna be figuring out what you want to do and typing it out. So you can type anything. It'd be as simple as just like, oh, I want to move this ship here. I want to research that, and I want to like upgrade this. That's literally it. There's nothing else there. Full ships are more combat effective though, but the thing is, pretty soon you're probably gonna have to gut those ships again, and you're going to have to rebuild them. You'll find out why. Um, Now, one thing that's important about Drone Wars, there is no dedicated server. We don't have a physical server that you like join and mine resources and build ships. No, we don't do that. No, you don't have to buy anything. Basically, it's a board game. Yes. So everything on Drone Wars is a board game, and everything only exists in theory on that board game. And when a battle happens on that board, then we go into Space Engineers, and the battle happens on a private server offline, no multiplayer, and we use AI to have the battle happen to prevent people from cheating. That's it, very simple. Now, all the rest of the information is on the left. Now, I'm going to get to designing ships here. So, your vehicles can be literally anything. There's infinite possibilities you can create. Now, I'm going to simplify everything here. I try to organize it so it's easier. I'm going to describe like the different types of vehicles. I'm going to describe how carriers changed in the new season. I'm going to describe how to use AI blocks for those of you that are unfamiliar with it. I'm going to describe some environmental hazards you guys are going to have to design around. And of course, we have some build tips that you guys might not be aware of. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. The first thing I want to go over are the different types of vehicles. Now, there's 4 types of vehicles that you can generally make, and they're divided into 3 layers of combat, and each of these things are going to be described below. So, a ship is going to be really simple. It's just anything that flies and battles on the sky, and it's the easiest to make. Basically, it's just a vehicle that can travel between planets freely, and you generally just need thrusters to make these work. They're pretty simple, pretty generic. You can make them really easily. When it comes to rovers, though, it gets a little more complicated because this is anything that drives along the ground with wheels, and it's a little bit more complicated to set up because wheels can't be controlled by AI blocks, unfortunately. Keen hasn't really coded that. So the way I have found to make this work is to use a long-range modded sensor to detect enemies, and when an enemy is detected, it will turn on your wheels using propulsion override to drive forward. When there's no more enemies in range, it will turn off the wheels and it's going to stop. And of course, if you want to stop better, just add a thruster going backwards. Yeah. So pretty simple, pretty easy. Now, mechs are interesting. So you're allowed to build mechs. A mech is anything that walks just along the ground on voxels. This will require either a script or a complex set of timers to work, and the easiest way to get these working is to use the same system. This is a long-range sensor that's going to trigger your walk cycle and get you to walk towards the enemy. Now, it's up to you how complicated you want to make things. As long as it doesn't lag, we're cool with it. Design however you want. Now, boats. You guys, water mod is going to be in here, so you guys can actually get away with a lot of stuff here. Now, you guys can make your own ships, basically anything that floats on water, and they're really easy to make. All you need is some thrusters and some pressurized rooms. Or if you're really lazy, just use some like, I don't know, like hydrogen or oxygen tanks. That works too. Now, we're going to get into the layers of combat. Now, when it comes to air and space, that's the highest layer of combat where all the flying vehicles are going to be battling. And most of these battles are going to be these air to space battles. Now, these battles are mostly going to be in space, but some of them are going to happen in a planet's atmosphere or gravity. And that can make things a lot more dangerous because then you have to worry about if your ship has enough thrust to, stay airborne. And, if an enemy takes out your thrusters, you can crash and take voxel damage. All that can happen. It gets ridiculous. In space, you don't have to worry about that. But because battles in space can travel really far away from the original point of battle, there's a new battle area system. So basically, any ships that leave the area will be forfeiting the battle, and they're actually going to be deleted in real time once they leave the area. Basically, I'm going to have a world with a limited size, and any ships that leave the area are going to be removed just automatically. So if you design your ships to run away, they're most likely going to get poofed. That's just something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to air and space battles, a ship is considered dead when it's unable to fly, And what I mean by unable to fly, let's say if it crashes down on the planet. If it crashes down on the planet and it can't get up, it's basically dead. If it's in space and it keeps drifting in one direction, it's basically dead. If the AI blocks are completely gutted, it's also dead. See, those are just some examples. Now, when it comes to ground combat here, so ground combat is just the most basic layer where all your ground vehicles are going to be fighting, and the enemy vehicles are going to be placed like really close together. No, they're destroyed. Yeah, we don't really have a flee mechanic because that makes things extremely complicated. Uh, a little bit too complicated. Uh, that leaves a lot of room for like a lot of exploitation. So I'm just gonna consider that if your ship leaves the battle area, it's considered destroyed. Also, because it automatically deletes your ship, I can't check which ships died from natural causes in battle or whether they died from just leaving the battle. It's just something to make sure I don't have to follow a battle for 200 kilometers and just sit there for like an hour watching a chase. Yeah, on the ground, your enemy vehicles are going to be placed like really close together. How big is the combat? Okay, well, how big is the combat area? I have so many ice ships to snipe from 10 kilometers away. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, the combat area is going to be like 100 kilometers across. We're all good. Yeah, 10 kilometers is fine. You can get away with that pretty well. All right, I'm going to continue describing these layers of combat. Um, so because of the way that ground combat works, AI blocks really struggle to see through voxel. So I'm going to be placing like your tanks and your rovers and all that stuff closer together so that way AI blocks can see each other easier. I'm going to put them closer based on like the distance that their weapons can see or whatnot, so that way your battles can actually do stuff. And the terrain will have a really heavy impact on the battle. Be wary of like cliffs, be wary of like holes and all that stuff. It's not the stuff you can't really control, but they do make a heavy impact on ground combat. You need to be really careful about how you design your vehicles and where you put your vehicles, because some areas are better for ground combat than others, and some vehicles might just die from the terrain. Now, voxel damage is going to be enabled during most of these battles, so when vehicles crash, they can take a lot of damage, and if a ground vehicle just cannot move anymore, it's considered lost. Now, if it gets stuck in like a tiny little pit, it's still fine, but like if it falls, and gets completely stuck, it's gone. Oh yeah, we do have the 100-kilometer AI in this as well, so yeah, you can go really far. All right, so then naval battles. Now, naval battles will only happen on planets that have an ocean made from water, and all the floating vehicles will battle here. Now, the most hazardous things here are going to be islands and land masses, which can change the outcomes of battles. Now, the thing is, when a ship gets sunk and it cannot resurface, it's going to be considered completely lost. And the reason why it's so like specific about like resurfacing is because you guys are allowed to make submarines if you want, but the thing is if your ship can't get back up, it's considered lost. That's basically the basic gist of naval combat. Now then, carriers. Carriers are interesting. So carriers don't work like they do last season. Now, we got a question. What's up, Phoenix? I'm assuming you're asking what happens if your boat gets like, I don't know, beached on the shore. If it gets beached on the shore, it's basically stuck. It's not necessarily dead unless another ship wipes it out. So there are different circumstances in which weird things can happen. So let's say there is a battle where one of your ships gets beached and is the last ship remaining and the enemy defeats all the other ships. That ship is considered, what happens if you initiate a battle with ships that just can't interact in that terrain? So that actually gets really interesting. So we'll get into that in a little bit, and that's actually what I'm going to get into with the carriers. Um, yeah, I'll get into that with the carriers. It's going to be very interesting. So With a carrier, if you want to move your forces between planets, you can't move them through like normal space or whatever. You're gonna need to design a carrier that can carry your ships around. It'll be handy if you're moving stuff like your rovers or your ships, your naval ships, or just some fighters around the place. Um, Technically, any vehicle can be a carrier as long as it can actually hold things, to make sure that the vehicles it plans on carrying actually fit. Now, it doesn't really matter whether it has to be an internal hangar or an external one, doesn't really matter. You can make it carry in different ways. Now, the capacity of a carrier depends on how much it can physically hold. You just need to make sure that your ship can carry all the stuff that it claims it can carry. Unlike the previous seasons, carriers do not restock their ships between battles. If you want to get more fighters for your carrier, you have to go back to a shipyard and restock the fighters. Or just make a bunch of fighters and send them to your carrier to restock it. The point of the carrier is actually to protect your ships. So in the case of Phoenix, it said, what happens if you initiate a battle with ships that can't interact with that terrain? The carrier can hold on to those, in theory, and those vehicles are not deployed. Oh yeah, your carriers can carry large grids now. In fact, you can make a carrier carry a carrier. There's no limits here. Go crazy. Yeah. So yeah, when you go into a battle, you have the option to either deploy your units that are being held by your carrier, or you could hold on to them and not deploy them. So if you know that if a planet is not good for your ground vehicles, you can decide not to deploy your ground vehicles. Same thing for your fighters. If you're saving your fighters for a bigger battle, you can say, I don't want to waste my fighters in this battle. Let's not use them. Or let's say you're carrying a big like boat around and you're just like, I want to go to a water planet, but there's this other fleet that's like prevented us from getting there. We're gonna go fight that fleet, but I'm not gonna use the boat because it doesn't work in space. But once you defeat that fleet, you can then go to the planet and deploy your boat. Stuff like that. It works. It's all cool. There are so many possibilities with this. There is one thing to note. If a carrier is destroyed during the battle, all the vehicles that are being carried by that carrier will be destroyed with it. And that's just a logic thing. Now, if the vehicles that were being held by the carrier were deployed in the battle and they were not destroyed, then they're still going to be alive. They just won't get the benefits of being protected by a carrier. So yeah, that's something that's interesting. Now we're going to get into using AI blocks. There's going to be a little crash course here. It's actually pretty interesting. I'm just going to give you guys a quick rundown of just every setting you guys need to know. So at minimum, you're just going to need an AI move and AI offensive, and you can need these on the main grid of your vehicles. And you can put them on your subgrids too. That's up to you how you want that to work. Now, when both of them are activated, your ship will use the settings that you set to fight. Now, the thing you have to be careful about is that voxels and water will block line of sight. And something I forgot to mention here is that, they can't control things that are on subgrids. So if you want them to control something that is on a subgrid, you will need to put more AI blocks on those subgrids. So that way they will actually utilize them. So let's say you make a fighter and you make those wings angled or curved using your rotors or hinges. You could put AI blocks on those wings to make weapons on them work better, or actually just like fire properly. Now below here is a list of like different things you can change. Collision avoidance here, right? Speed limit. I'm sure you guys know how all this stuff works, but it's all here in the documents. If you have all this stuff to explain all these different things. Now, I'll just go through everything just little by little here. I mean, the collision avoidance here is pretty simple. It's just your vehicle trying to avoid crashing into things. If a vehicle is on the ground or if it's on water, you want to turn that off because if it's on, it's going to be dodging itself constantly, trying not to hit the ground even though it's on the ground. But if you want things to ram, turn this off as well. That also works. As for your speed limit, that's the fastest you want the vehicle to move. If your vehicle is a mech or a rover, set it to 0 because they don't actually use that setting. They're actually going to be using propulsion override or the script to move, so the speed limit doesn't actually matter for them. For minimum altitude, that's how close you want your vehicle to get to the ground at minimum. The lower you set it, probably the better it is going to be at hitting things, but that's more of a risk because it will crash into the ground more likely than not. Now, this setting doesn't really matter for ground vehicles, but it's really important for flying ships so you don't want to crash into the ground. If your ship is like really big and at risk of falling into gravity, set it to the highest, like 500 meters, so it stays away from the ground. That also helps with the more chaotic terrain. So if the terrain is very spiky, you definitely want a higher minimum altitude. Now, aligned to gravity, this is something you want to keep on for all vehicles. This basically just keeps your vehicle vertical and makes sure it doesn't, flip over or anything. If you turn this off, your vehicle just will fly in whatever direction it wants. It's going to be kind of weird. You're going to make sure your thrusters are like equal in all directions if you plan on keeping this off. Now, your maximum pitch angle here, this is basically how far your ship can look up or down. Basically, this is the highest it's going to be able to fire at things like in gravity. So basically, what you can do is you can just like get your ship and like angle it upwards by a certain amount or angle it downwards by a certain amount. And the moment it starts like falling, you know what its maximum angle is, and that's the angle you want to use. So that way it never goes past that angle. That will keep it flying better. Um, the higher you set your pitch angle, the better it can aim at things though. So if you are in a planetary battle and you set the pitch angle to like 90 degrees, it can fire straight up and straight down with no problems. But if you set it to like 20 degrees, it can't shoot under itself with its main cannons. So that's something to keep in mind. And as for the roll angle, it's how far your ship can roll from side to side. This will be 0 for most of your flying vehicles, just to make sure you don't slide from side to side. But it can be higher for ground vehicles, and it helps them when they're on slopes and stuff, so that way they can like adjust the terrain. I suggest like 20 degrees, but you can set to 45 or whatever you want, as long as it doesn't flip over, you're good. Now, your AI offensive has a lot of different things on it. So, you have your target priority, where your ship's going to basically what your ship wants to go after first. It's like, do you want to go after the smallest thing? Do you want to go after the biggest thing? Or do you want to go after the thing that's closest to you? Every setting has its own advantages. Now, target search interval. This is something that's actually really important, and a lot of people misunderstood this in the last season. This is how often it will check for new targets. Now, when you set it to the lowest setting, it means it's going to be constantly checking for the next target. And something you guys might not have realized is that if it's constantly searching for the next target, that means it's going to be switching targets constantly. So if you try to go after the biggest ship, what happens is that when you destroy enough of that ship and it sees another ship that's like now has like one more block, it's going to switch and go after that one. And then it's going to be going back and forth constantly, which is a problem. But if you set the target search interval for longer, that means that it will lock onto that vehicle, that enemy vehicle, for longer, and it will also stay locked on even if the other grid hides behind voxel or other things, which is super useful. So a longer search interval actually does have its benefits if you want to stay locked onto a target. But of course, it does have that risk to it, where like you're not going to be able to adapt as quickly. As for threatening subsystem, that's basically what you want to consider a threat. If you want the best results, keep this default, because if you change it, sometimes it just doesn't target things. It gets really weird, but you're welcome to play with that. Um, Attack pattern is basically what you want it to, or how you want to attack things. Now, every pattern is different. You guys can experiment with the different ones. Yeah, there's several. Just pick whatever you want. Now the distance. This is a setting that will determine the minimum and maximum ranges your ship will fight from. Ideally, your minimum range should be roughly the range that you want to not collide with things, and the maximum range should probably be a little bit less than the maximum range of your weapons, so you can stay within your effective range in combat constantly. That'll help you to maximize your damage output. Now, circle and planetary gravity, whenever you get that option, keep that on. If you turn that off, that means you can do orbits into the ground, other things like that. It gets weird. Now, facing mode is something that's interesting. It's which side you want to point at the enemy. Most of the time, it's going to be the front of your ship, but if you want a proper broadside, you can make it so when it gets close enough to battle, it switches to the left or right side, and then they can actually do a proper broadside as it's flying by the enemy, and that can be really fun. Uh, Evasive maneuvers. If you turn that on, it's just going to move around and dodge randomly. It's something you can mess with. The retreat timeout is how long it should take before it decides to do another attack run, and that works best if it's being chased. So the retreat timeout does work really. I suggest you make that like shorter, so it adapts faster. As for the retreat angle, that's basically just the angle that you want to change directions. Basically, when it's done doing an attack. If you want to ram, just use that to 0. Uh, Your retreat angle can be like, I don't know, 45 degrees is just turn off to the side, 90 degrees means it's like dodging like full left. You do 180, it basically does a U-turn. That's basically what that does. Now, you can use multiple AI blocks with sensors or timers if you want more advanced behaviors, you want to switch between multiple things, you can do that. Now, I do have pre-made AI modules, and there is a link right here if you guys actually want to use that. I will share this document later so you can actually get to that. Now, environmental hazards, there's a lot of stuff here. Now, there's a lot of hazards that your vehicles will run into, and we're just going to simplify this by just we just split all of the hazards into different layers of combat here. So for all of your vehicles, you're going to have stuff like in acidic environments. There are going to be some plants in this season that will have acidic environments that will slowly damage vehicles over time, which will be really bad. And of course, there are some plants that have some extreme terrain, like really tall mountains and stuff. They're basically impossible to climb for rovers, but because of how steep the angle is, even your ships won't be able to detect them, which means they can fly at full speed into them. So things are going to get really chaotic. As for naval, islands, there is a risk of colliding with them, getting like beached on them, and getting stuck. That's generally not a good thing. As for ground, there are some planets that have lava on them that can melt vehicles. There are, of course, canyons and cliffs, like the ones on Pertam. If your vehicle falls in, it's basically done for. It's rough terrain like bumps and stuff, and if your vehicles are designed to drive at like really high speeds, then that can be really bad for them as they flip over. Trees can also be a problem for some vehicles too. If your vehicle is very lightweight, you can get stuck on them, and that can be a problem in combat. As for voxel damage, if you make something that's super heavy, it might actually sink into the ground. You can use wheels on wheel suspensions to help prevent damage, and if you are making mechs, you can also use some other tricks to prevent that damage as well. I believe there's one trick where if you use a wheel suspension block with yeah, if you use a wheel suspension block with a rotor head, you can actually make your legs invulnerable to the floor as well, which will work really well for you guys. Now, as for the hazards in the air, well, you have gravity. Higher gravity means that you need more thrusters, or the ship is just going to fall and crash to the ground, like the image down below. Or, the battle border, which means that if any of your ships leave the effective battle area, they're going to be instantly deleted and lost. Now, the interesting thing is that with all these hazards and stuff, you can design around most of them. You're not required to make your vehicles capable of combat in all environments. You can be very niche. Now, you're going to have the ability to research your plants, and you're going to be able to learn more about their environments and plan ahead, so you can design vehicles for specific environments instead of for all of them. And that might actually be a little bit better than just making a jack of all trades kind of vehicle, because that can be very expensive. Now, we're going to get into ship registration after our build tips here. Oh boy, so build tips. Here's some interesting tips on how to design your vehicles. Basically, when you're designing, make some hard points. Hard points are going to be really useful because then you can swap out your weapons as you upgrade and research new things. And you want to build your vehicles as shells, so it's easier to build different versions of the same ship upgraded over time. One thing that you guys might have not have noticed in the previous season, uh, but EMP weapons, specifically direct EMP weapons, um, they don't have that much of an effect against subgrids. Basically, if your ship has a subgrid and the EMP hits that subgrid, the main grid is not affected. But if the EMP hits the main grid, the subgrids are not affected. So you can actually use that to actually mitigate the effects of EMP weapons. If you're trying to counter like explosive weapons, you can use spaced armor and stuff like that, or different armor types. Now, crew is something we'll get into in a bit. You know, you will need to protect your crew. Your crew are going to be determining the health of your ship and how much firepower you can have on your ships. You're going to need to protect your AI blocks to keep things working. And of course, you can carry as many carriers as you want. Decorative non-functional blocks are not restricted by the tech tree at all. So, lights and stuff like that are not restricted, and like other decorative things aren't really restricted. You're allowed to use thrusters internally, but you have to be careful about thruster damage and stuff like that. There are multiple different technologies that are more cost effective than others. Let's see. You don't have to maximize your weapon limits because weapons can get very expensive. Uh, Another tip is to just have multiple conveyor lines on your ship, and that's helpful because it helps your hydrogen from being cut. You could do different patterns and stuff like that to make sure your hydrogen just has multiple ways of getting around. And of course, some functional blocks like gyroscopes or batteries are just really going to be in armor, so you can save some costs by doing that as well. those are some basic things. Now, let me drink some water real quick before we continue. All right, you guys gotta make sure to stay hydrated. We'll get to that. Registering ships, okay? Before you can produce ships, you're gonna need to register them. So registering ships is actually way easier than the previous season. So basically, you're going to be opening up a ship registration calculator that I've created, like a spreadsheet for. And then what you're going to need to do is you're going to get the blueprint of your ship and you're going to load into a creative world with the instant projection mod, kind of like what you guys are doing with the previous season. Now, on your registration sheet, you're going to have stuff like, on the bottom, you're going to have this where it says weapons, super weapons, calculations stuff. You're going to want to go to this calculations tab. Now, in this tab, you're going to see a bunch of information you could put about your ship. So in the top left, you're going to see this section here. You have all this stuff here. So right here, you have the block count. You can type in your block count right here. And then what happens is you're going to have a bunch of crew blocks on your ship. And these crew blocks can be a variety of different things. And all these are going to be grouped together, so you can basically put them here for the total seats. And of course, you could use instant projection to get these materials here. Those are all the materials you really care about. Steel plates, interior plates, girders, protect panels, theriated flesh, and necrodermis. Those are the only materials you really care about. Everything else doesn't really matter. These are basically just the base materials of every block of the game. That's all that determines cost. But yeah, that makes it so much easier. So yeah, you're gonna put your blueprint to the console block, scroll down to see your full list of components, and you're gonna basically just fill in all the sections for the values. If your material doesn't appear in the list, then you put 0. It's so much easier. You don't have to look for everything. You just look for your specific components. And then, after you're done with this part, you're gonna go to the tab called Weapons. So in the Weapons tab, you're gonna look for the weapons you want to put on your ship and type in how many you have on your ship. All the weapons are going to be organized by mod. You can filter them by different values if you want to find specific types of weapons. Of course, here's an example here. You have your weapons here. Or, yeah, your weapons tab. And you can do the same for the super weapons tab if your ship has a super weapons, that is. Now, once you finish doing all this, you're going to go back to your calculations tab. There's going to be a bar that's going to be red and green, and it's got these true or false statements. This is basically going to let you know if there's any specific errors with your ship. So it'll let you know if you have too many blocks, if you're outside the block count range, if you have too many weapons for the size of your ship, if you don't have enough crew for if your ship is large grid or small grid. You can basically ignore it if your ship is like, small grid, you don't have to worry about large grid. If your ship is large grid, you don't have to worry about crew for a small grid. Basically that kind of stuff. And of course, missing data is for if you just don't have things typed above, like this stuff up here. Now, if you want more details about exactly what's wrong with your ship, there's a light blue section in the corner over here. That's going to be called a message from the system. It's going to tell you exactly what's wrong with your ship and how to fix it. And it does this dynamically, which is really cool. So you can see here, it has like a little message from the system, which will tell you, like, it'll tell you basically like exactly what to do. So if you're missing a certain thing, it'll point to the error and exactly where that error is. And it'll also make comments on specific parts of your ship. For example, like the materials and stuff, and like your firepower and your size of the ship, and all these different things. It's pretty interesting and fun to read. If you look in the bottom left section of the registration sheet, which we'll get to eventually, there's going to be a section called Extra Information. In this section, you're going to find detailed information about your ship. Now, all the information that's in this section doesn't actually affect the price of your ship, but it's useful if you want to compare the stats of your ship to other of your ship. So you can see stuff like armor density, which is just how much armor your ship has compared to its size. Its firepower to armor ratio, weapon to crew ratios. It's a minimum weapons range, maximum weapon range, that kind of stuff. It's really all right. That was weird. But yeah, all this stuff here is actually going to be super useful for if you want to like know how protected your ship is or how, efficient your ship is. So you could do a lot of your efficiency. So yeah, that's pretty useful. Now, in the middle center of the registration sheet, there's going to be a section called Ship Stats, and that's where you can see all the relevant information about your ship. It's going to include the costs that it takes to build your ship and how much crew your ship is going to need to work. And there's going to be a section called research data, and your research data is going to be the cost in research that's going to take to register the ship for your army. If you don't have enough research, then you cannot register that ship. That is how registering ships is going to be balanced. You can't just have unlimited ships registered because the more ships you register, the more it's going to cost in research. That's something you guys probably were not prepared for. You can see here's an example here, a bunch of stuff here. But yeah, if your ship has no errors and you have enough research data to register that ship, then your ship's going to be ready to be registered properly. To fully register your ship, you just need to upload it to the workshop. You can set it to be public, or you can make it hidden if you don't want other people to look at it. Just make sure that your upload is not private because game masters have to be able to subscribe to it and use it in these battles to actually be able to like record everything. But also, one thing you need to make sure is that everything on there is accurate before you actually like upload it. Now, you could just basically grab a screenshot of like the information of the ship and then just, you know, you could grab a screenshot or copy the information from the sheet and include it in the workshop description or the images. And basically, once that's done, you can clear the sheet and include the link in your workshop submission for your weekly actions. Um, yeah, if any of the information about your ship is wrong and the prices are wrong because you miscalculated or because you know, you're trying to be cheeky and make your ship cheaper than it actually is, the game masters are going to randomly check if your information for ships are accurate. If your ship information is inaccurate, your faction will be punished by the Wheel of Misfortune. And the Wheel of Misfortune is very brutal, so you don't really want to know what happens there. We'll get to that at the end, but you don't want to get the Wheel of Misfortune. Make sure to register your ships properly. It's not that difficult. It's literally just put in what your block count is, how many of these are, and which weapons you have. Now, resources. This is going to be something interesting. The previous season, there was only one resource. In this season, there are multiple different resources that you will have to manage. And these different resources have different purposes, okay? So there's a variety of different resources you're going to need to manage, and most of these resources are really easy to get, and they are not permanently removed when you use them. Unlike the previous season, they actually work very differently. It's kind of like a weird system where let's say you spend points on a ship, right? And that ship goes into battle. When that ship dies, you don't lose resources from losing the ship. Those resources get refunded back to you so you can make new ships. So basically, your total resources is more of a total that you could distribute across multiple things. Think of it as like a maintenance amount, basically. If your ship is lost, you don't need to contribute that towards the maintenance of that ship because it doesn't exist anymore. Now, there's a list of resources here. You have crew, fabrication units, munitions, commodities, singularity cores, research data, and operations. That's like what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different resources? That's a lot. But we're going to go over all of them and figure out exactly what they are because all of these resources are really important. Your first resource is going to be crew. Lots of you guys just were not expecting this at all. I'm pretty sure lots of you guys just were not prepared for this. Crew is a resource that measures the available population they can serve in your military. And basically, crew are used for things, ranging from like driving your vehicles, operating your weapons, maintenance, reloading, production, just all the things that are happening in your ship, your crew are responsible for. If you don't have enough crew for your ship, then your ship is basically just unusable until you have enough people to pilot it. And of course, you can increase the amount of available crew by upgrading population centers on habitable worlds. Now, crew is the only resource in this season that can be lost during battles. So every seat and piece of crew furniture that's destroyed during a battle is counted as a lost crew member. And what's interesting is that your crew is going to act as like a health bar for your ships. Although your ships get fully repaired, the number of crew on your ships will actually be marked down over time. Now, luckily, you can actually resupply your ship's crew at a friendly shipyard, or you can move your crew between ships to keep your fleets alive for longer. That means that what you can do is you can actually create like, I don't know, let's say you make like a, I don't know, like a logistics ship, like a, let's say like a non-combatant ship, like a really armored ship that has like less combat abilities to make it cheaper, but it has a lot of crew capabilities. So that way when your other ships go into battle, that ship can just, heal them by just giving them more crew. So you can do stuff like that. Now, fabrication units. Fabrication units are basically what make your ships. They're basically your ready-made materials that are being used for building, and they're mostly just going to be metals and electronic components that are put together, right? They're useful for everything that makes the hull and internals. They're like the armor, the interior, and even the systems. They're all made from fabrication units. If you don't even have fabrication units, you're not going to be able to even build anything. Now, you can get more of these fabrication units by upgrading factories, and factories work best on hotter planets where molten metals are easier to obtain. So different planets actually have different uses. So some planets are more valuable than others if you want specific resources. Now, munitions are basically what you're using to make weapons and ammunition. In order to make the best weapons, you're going to need rare materials. And these rare materials include things like super heavy metals, explosive materials, and extremely rare and valuable minerals that are only found in really specific conditions. Now, all this is used for producing the weapon systems and ammunition that your weapons are going to be using. Now, the reason why you're not using cheaper materials is because, critical failure in space can lead to the loss of a lot of ships, if something misfires. So only the best materials are allowed to be used when it comes to your weapon systems. Now, if you don't have enough materials to make good weapons, you're probably going to need to make your ship a bit cheaper or use less weapons to compensate for that. Um, you can get more of these munitions from mining dense planets with really heavy gravity fields. The more dangerous to gravity, the more likely that rare and valuable minerals might be present in or around that planet. That makes them pretty valuable, but also really dangerous to fight over. Now, commodities are an interesting resource that you guys are going to really like. It's a resource with a very specific purpose. Unlike all the other resources that are used immediately for building, commodities aren't used for building. They're used for trading. Now, they give you the ability to trade with other factions. So commodities can be used to trade with other players for things, such as, territory exchange, mercenary contracts, or other things. You guys can make up whatever you want to use them for. But of course, you can also use them to buy extra resources from your own faction. So you can go to your own population. You could say, hey, I need some more soldiers. I need some more people for my fleet. So I'll give up some commodities to my people so that way I can hire them to join my forces. Or, I'm gonna buy some like I'll buy some like extra like fabrication units from my like the local market from my own faction. So you give them some commodities and you can get that basically. So it's a resource that you can trade with your own faction or with other factions to get certain resources. And that makes it easier to get resources if you're on a planet that's like not very good and you don't have a lot on it. So pretty useful, right? Now, the thing is, to get commodities, you're going to have to set up like a little trade station. And of course, trade stations work best where trade routes work best. So merchants really have a habit of setting trade routes like near high density atmospheres. Usually around places like gas giants, they're usually the best places for trade stations to flourish. And you can collect commodities from there based on the level of your trade station. Now, commodities are one of the only resources that can be traded. If you do not have enough commodities to support what you've already spent, you're going to be in debt. Being in debt doesn't make you lose anything. It just means you just can't buy anything else until your supply meets your demand. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. Now, singularity cores. Singularity cores are a really neat resource. And unlike a lot of these other resources, these are extremely rare. You cannot produce these. Basically, they're containers of pure energy. Like as if you got a condensed star and packaged it into a tiny handheld container. That's how much energy is inside one of these. And they are extremely dangerous to open, so they're just like collectibles. They cannot be produced and they're only really found. And you can get them through events or quests. The material itself isn't super well known, but its uses are extremely powerful. Because the thing is, they're the only finite resource in the game. They can be traded like commodities with other players, and of course the price of these is not set. So you guys get to determine the price of it. You could say, oh well, I'll sell you a singularity core for like 100 commodities, and then someone else is like, nope, I'll sell it to you for 10. Or you can go the other way. You can say, oh, well, singularity cores are extremely rare, like really rare. I'm going to sell it to you for 1 million commodities. You can do stuff like that. But it's up to you guys how you want to set that up. Now, commodities are interesting because they're used for the production and use of super weapons. And these weapons are capable of altering the map itself. Now, different super weapons they will require different amounts of cores to function, and they can be used normally in battles. But every super weapon has a unique ability that can be used against targets on the map. And to use that special ability, you need to use extra singularity cores to actually use that ability. Now, if a super weapon does use its ability, the cores you use to fire will be subtracted permanently from the game, which means they're no longer being like circulated through the things. That makes them really valuable, and you have to use them very carefully because you don't get any more. Now, the good news about singularity cores is that if you have a ship with super weapons and that ship is destroyed, you do get those super weapons back. Or not super weapons, but those singularity cores back. But if you use that super weapon for like a super weapon like ability, those super weapon points are gone. Those singularity cores are gone. Yeah, because of the nature of singularity cores, they're going to be extremely valuable. You can use them as powerful bartering chips with other factions. You can use them to establish economic alliances, or you can use it to go on a quest to go and eradicate another faction. You can do that if you really want. You get to decide if this rare resource can be used for peace or for war. That's up to you guys. Now, as for research data is a resource that represents the total amount of data that you've collected and spent, and you can spend this on like research and different things. It's probably the most important resource in this game. Now, data is used for research in different technologies in the tech tree and developing more powerful weapons. Um, At the same time, data is also used in the ship registration process to create new ship designs for use in your military. Now, if you don't have data, you're not able to research anything, you can't add new ship designs to your army. So it's super important. Now, research data could be obtained by building labs on interesting planets. The more difficult and hostile a planet is, the more research potential it's going to have, which means you can get more research out of it. And then your last resource here is your operations. Now, operations are a measure of the things that you can do. Unlike other resources, do you need to use data to update ship designs? Yes, but I will get into that. That's actually something interesting. So, let's say you update a ship design. So, how do I explain that? That's something that is explained easier on how to play your faction sheet, I think. Basically, let's say you have a ship and you want update it with new weapons that you have. So you'll need to bring all of your old ships to shipyards to disassemble them or retrofit them. Once you no longer have any of your old ships, then you can unregister your old design because you're not using it anymore. And your old design will be refunded back to you. The research you use for your old design. That's the way that'll work. So yeah, you can actually refund your research, which is neat. At least when it comes to ships. When it comes to on the tech tree, you don't really get to do that, and that'll be explained soon on the research tree part. Gotta make sure to stay hydrated here. The operations are like actions in the previous season. Unlike other resources, operations are not obtained through upgrades, and they're a resource that's spent weekly. Now, operations. What if you want to keep the old designs but make new ones? You just use your research points for that. That's fine. Yeah, you're just registering new designs. You can register as many designs as you want, but the more designs you have, the more research you're using to make them, basically. So you can keep your old designs. That's perfectly fine. What you can do is you can... Oh, sorry. So Steele asked, what if you want to keep the old designs but make new ones? Well, then you don't have to refund your old ship designs. Yeah, go away. Yeah, you don't have to refund old ship designs. You can keep your old ship designs if you want to keep using them across the season. That's perfectly fine. It's up to you if you want to keep or unregister certain things. That's up to you. But yeah, operations are interesting. They're resources used specifically for upgrading or building structures and planets. They're the only resource in the game that's used for producing other resources aside from commodities. Um, Now, operations are something that is given out weekly to all factions, and you guys can choose to spend or save your operations for later. It's a resource you can actually stack up. And here's the thing, if you join in the middle of the season, not the beginning, but later in the season, you will receive the amount of operations equal to as if you started from the beginning, which means you're going to have a whole lot of operations waiting for you if you join later. And that helps you to catch up really quickly. So that's something that's really, really good to know. Now we're going to get into planetary upgrades. When you capture a planet, you're going to have the option to upgrade different parts of the planet to produce different resources. Planets, basically, they don't generate one resource anymore. You can actually upgrade them to do multiple things. Now, the resources a planet has is going to depend heavily on the type of planet it is and what's on it. So not every planet's going to have every resource, so you might want to check on it before gathering something that doesn't really exist. If you want to see how many resources a planet can produce, you can basically build a research lab on it to give you some basic information about the planet. If you upgrade the lab on that planet to level 2, you're going to get extra research data, like you normally would, but you're also going to get extra information about the planet's environment and terrain. And, this information, both of these, are going to be put in the Discord in that planetary research channel. It's going to be pretty neat to see. This is actually stuff that will be available to everyone. So when you upgrade a lab to level 2, everyone can see the information, everyone learns that stuff. Now, I've simplified all this down here, all these. And basically all this here, this is basically just how much it costs. You can see the more you upgrade, the more stuff it gives you, but the more expensive it gets. It gets very expensive very quickly, especially if you're trying to make a massive amount of things. I don't expect anyone to get any of these things to max level for a long time considering it costs a lot. You can see just how much stuff there is here. Okay, so now we're going to go into building structures here. So, uh, there's several different structures you can build, and these structures can be built anywhere, for the most part. There are a couple exceptions. So you can make shipyards, portals, and jump gates. Those are the three things you can make. Now, shipyards, which are going to be represented by this little symbol over here, they're where you're going to be able to build new units and fleets. And technically, you can build as many ships as you want from a shipyard as long as you have the resources for it. But the size of ships you can make from a shipyard depends on the level of the shipyard. So a basic shipyard can only build ships up to 3,000 blocks. If you want to build bigger ships, you need to upgrade your shipyard. And you can see the higher level you make your shipyard, the bigger you can make your ship, up to the capacity limit here. So this is something to keep in mind. You can't just make massive ships right off the bat. You actually need to start with smaller ships, and you have to use your operations to upgrade your shipyards to make bigger ships. So things like that are going to be very interesting. Now we're going to get to portals. Portals are structures that are going to allow you to travel between 2 points instantly, and they're super useful if you want to supply ships to the front lines or if you want to help your allies. You don't have to spend a month or even I don't know, several months traveling from one side of the system to the other. Now you could just build a portal from one point of your system to another, and you can take your ships from one point to the other to fast travel basically. And it's so useful. Now the thing is, your ships are going to need a jump drive on at least one of their ships to pass through. Portals cannot travel across different regions of the map, just within local systems and stuff like that. But yeah, as you can see, there's three different levels of portals. The basic one allows you to travel between portals that you own. Nobody else can use them. Now, if you upgrade to level 2, That means that it can recognize allies and allows you to travel to other friendly portals. So basically, if someone else has a level 2 portal, then you could travel to their portal, as long as they're a friend. And of course, if it's level 3, that means any new players can spawn at it. Basically, existing factions can't teleport to it, only you and friendlies, and new players can go to there. Why would you want new players to go ahead and like spawn in your territory? Well, that's a good question. I know no one's asking, but it's something I do want to bring up. New players don't really have the strength to fight or anything like that, but the thing is, you guys can actually make a mutual agreement with new factions. Let's say that they need some territory, you can actually lend them some territory in exchange for like future resources. You can make different agreements and stuff. You can make alliances with new factions and whatnot. You can do all kinds of different things by having this new player spawn in there. Basically, by having new players join, with your territory and giving them some territory in exchange, what could happen is they can upgrade that planet for you and give you they can give you some commodities in exchange for that territory. And that helps by making sure that you don't have to spend your operations on those upgrades to get those commodities and stuff like that. So that actually is super useful to know. You can do stuff like that. Now, jump gates are interesting. So a jump gate is a mechanism that allows you to travel to other distant areas within the galaxy. So at least one ship in your fleet needs to have a jump drive in order for you to jump through. Now, these can only be built on the edges of the map, and they allow you to travel to other sections of the map that are isolated. Now, a basic jump gate is only going to allow you to go to the next adjacent quadrant, and it costs a lot to make. But basically, these are the only ways you can travel to other like quadrants now. And this makes it so it basically, how do I put it? This helps control the way that people can explore the map in a way. It makes it very interesting so you guys can't explore the whole map at once. Basically, things are going to be somewhat limited because you guys are going to need to save up to be able to do this. Now, when you upgrade one of these to level 2, it's going to allow you to travel to any of the other existing jump gates in the galaxy, not just the one it's pointing at. Um, if you upgrade one to level 3, it will allow you to travel to any point in the galaxy that has already been explored. So these can be really, really powerful if you have them. Now we're going to get into the research tree and how that works. Now, the research tree is interesting. Everyone's going to have access to this. It'll be in the Discord. At first glance, it's going to look really complicated, but it's really a lot simpler than it looks. Let me take a look at a message on Discord real quick. Hold on. I've been pinged. Yeah, there is a lot. All right, yeah, there's a lot to cover here. So everyone's going to start from the green square labeled faction research. That's going to be in the middle of the tech tree. There's actually two trees. Now, from here, there's going to be these lines going out, these green ones. They're going to go to different sections. Okay, so you can follow the lines to any technology that's on the tree, and these arrows, these like white things here with like little like triangles sticking out, it's going to show the direction the tree goes in. Okay, now if you see a circle like this, that's going to represent an area where you need two different paths or more paths to be able to continue through that path. So that's an interesting like thing about the tech tree. You might need to research two different things to continue. Now, every part of the tech tree will require at least one level before you can continue along its path. You don't actually have to research anything more than once to research past it, but you can continue researching the same thing over and over to basically get more stuff from it. Now, a red square like this represents a major advancement that you unlock. It basically unlocks like a major progression step in your faction. And it's going to require an operation in addition to the research points it costs in order to get it. So it basically prevents people from just getting things all with exclusively research points if they have a lot of those. Now, when you're researching like weapons and stuff on the main tree, it's going to unlock branches on the separate weapons research tree. And the weapons research tree is going to display every single weapon that could be unlocked at every level. And it's also going to be used for other things on the main tree, such as like, thrusters, fuel, all this other stuff, right? And just give me a little example here. Let's say you're researching along the tech tree and you unlock Gatling guns, right? This area on the tech tree, like the other tech tree, is going to unlock, and you're going to be able to research this, and it's going to slowly go upwards, revealing what's there. So basically, the higher level you research this, the more stuff you unlock as you go up. Now, there's going to be little blue boxes like this. They'll say like level 10, level 20, level 30. These are major breakthroughs in your research. When someone researches a technology past that level, that's basically going to be a technological breakthrough that significantly increases the effectiveness of the technology, which means that the more you research something, the more powerful it gets, like exponentially. So every time you get, let's say like you're here, right? This only has a little bit of damage, level 10, now it gets like 10 times more powerful. You get to level 20, now it's 100 times more powerful, and it goes like that basically. So as you keep researching things, it's going to get more and more expensive, but it's going to get way more powerful. The price of the technology on the research tree is determined by a little formula I've written down here. The level cubed times 100. You can memorize that if you want. You don't really have to memorize it. Just assume the price gets more expensive, and you guys are going to have access to a little thing that's going to help you to know how much the next level is going to cost anyways. But yeah, here's an example. The level 1 costs 100, while level 3 costs 900, stuff like that. But yeah, every technology has its own maximum level depending on what is available. Now, when you unlock new weapons, you can actually go to the registration sheet, where you register your ships or whatnot, and you can actually search for your weapons based on different criteria, which we found here. You can filter by mod, or you can filter by all these things. How many operations do people get per week? I think like 3 of them? I'll have to check. We'll get to that eventually when I get to this over here. But over here, you can filter by the exact mod if you want to find like all the mods, or sorry, all the weapons in a specific mod. And over here, you can also filter all these different things. So your damage, your range, your aiming type, weapon type here. You can filter by their barrels, the pods, the width, the grid size here. You can assume the smaller number is small grid. But, you can do the filters like that to help you find things easier. That's the research tree for you guys. It wasn't too complicated, was it? I mean, you guys will see what the research tree looks like in a little bit, right over here. So now we're going to go over to the faction sheet. Each of you guys are going to receive a reference sheet that's going to be updated automatically every single week. And when I say automatic update, I mean literally automatic. I'll show you how that works later with these up here. You cannot edit any of the information on that sheet except for a small section that allows you to safely and secretly describe what your actions are for the week. It's pretty neat. And the sheet has, these things on it. All these. So you have your resources, your statistics, your research, your trading, super weapons, your weekly actions, your registry, your roster, and of course your fleets. Now, your resources here. The first section with your resources is located at the top left, and that's where you're going to see how many resources you have. Now, the numbers here are entirely dependent on the facilities you have, and they do not increase over time. Unlike the previous season where it's like, you have a budget and, your income per week basically increases your budget over time, that doesn't happen anymore. Now your resources are fixed, and to get those higher, you need to basically upgrade your stuff. Now, whenever you build or upgrade, the numbers on your resource tab here are going to change to reflect how much you have left to spare. If you lose a ship in battle, those resources are going to be refunded, and that allows you to reallocate those resources for better ships or replacement ships. Now, if you lose a facility, you're going to lose the resource output from it, and your available resources are going to decrease. If any of your resources become negative, then you're going to be unable to make anything using that resource until you clear that deficit. That's going to be a bit of a problem for some people if you're trying to defend one planet and if someone takes it, you lose all of your ability to make anything. That could be a big problem. Now, you're going to have a section called statistics. And this section is for recording the information and how well you're playing. And this is a fun little part because you're welcome to share all the information from this amongst each other if you want to compare and, figure out who's doing better than who. It's going to tell you how many planets are being controlled, how many battles you've won or lost. It tells you how many ships you have, how many ships you've built since starting, how many ships have been destroyed in combat. It also tells you how many ships have been removed, including the ones that were salvaged or lost outside of combat. It'll tell you how many wins to losses you have. It'll tell you how many times you've used super weapons, how many purchases you've made with your own people. It tells you the total amount of resources you've collected, how much you've used, and the amount of resources you have left. Pretty neat. Now, you're also going to have access to a little research section in the middle that will tell you how much research you have put into specific branches of the tree. It's going to tell you the maximum level of the tree. It's going to tell you the expected price of the next level. And of course, if you level up things on that tree high enough, it's going, of course, going to unlock new technology that you can use on your ships. Of course, every single time you upgrade a branch by 10 levels, I'm going to be explaining some lore in the Discord for how you achieved that major scientific breakthrough, and that lore is going to be public for everyone to see. But it's only going to be shown once. If someone else makes that breakthrough again, then I'm not going to show it because it's already been reached. So that's going to be pretty neat. I had to do so much research for this. Okay, there's going to be a section called commodity trading. Ooh, why is that? There we go. So there's going to be a small section on the right where you can exchange commodities for other resources. It's going to tell you what kind of resources you can buy and how much they can cost. It's also going to tell you how many times you've purchased a resource, so that you can know how many commodities you're spending to keep those resources. Now, when you make a purchase, your commodities are going to be exchanged for an equivalent amount of whatever resource you're buying, and that makes it gives you a chance to get difficult resources for a fair rate. So if you're having a hard time getting something, like let's say you have a planet that doesn't have munitions and you really want some, you can just buy commodities from your people, or buy you can buy those munitions for commodities. So that way you can at least build some ships and do some stuff. Now, this section can also be used as a measure for trading resources with other factions. While you can't directly trade, resources like your fabrication units and all that stuff, you can trade commodities with other factions. That allows you to indirectly trade those resources. It's like, well, I want to get fabrication units from this faction. Well, they can give you commodities, so that way you can spend those commodities with their people to then get your fabrication units. That's how that'll work. Now, if you ever have a deficit in commodities, you're not going to lose the resources you've already bought, but you're going to be unable to buy any new resources until you settle that debt. Now, super weapon abilities. There's going to be a section near the bottom right of that sheet where you're going to be able to use singularity cores to boost the firepower of your weapons. Now, super weapons are going to be using singularity cores, and they can alter the map and cause extreme destruction to anything in their path. There's going to be a little chart that shows every single super weapon in the game, and it's going to have a short description of what each one can do when you give it singularity cores. The amount it costs to use them is also shown, as well as the total number of times you have used that super weapon ability. The amount of singularity, keep in mind that singularity cores used by these abilities are not refunded. Once you use an ability, those singularity cores are permanently spent. So use them wisely. It's also worth noting that you can't use the abilities unless you have a ship that actually has the super weapon. The super weapon that a ship has determines the ability that that ship has. Very useful. Now there's going to be a small section in green where you can type what you want to do for the week. It's going to be a little green area, and the thing that's cool about it is you can type things like, I want to move this fleet here, I want to build this here, I want to buy this, I want to trade this with that person, I want to basically do whatever. And you can basically just say anything that you want me or Steel to know, basically me, Steel, or Little. If you want us to know what you plan on doing, just type it there and we'll make it happen. However, anything you type outside of that, we will not be able to see. That's hidden. That's stuff that only you can see. So you can take notes anywhere outside the green area, and that's private only for you. That's super useful to know. And of course, the ship registry. There's going to be a large section to the right of everything where you can actually see your full registry of all the ships you have registered. It's going to tell you which ships you have registered, and it's going to tell you how much they cost. So it'll tell you the cost per ship and the total cost of all the ships that were in that This will tell you the total cost of all the ships that were there. So that's going to be interesting. Now, the information is going to be useful for determining how many resources are being spent on each type of ship. So you can tell if one ship is using more of your resources than others. it'll be useful. If you're wondering where all your munitions go, you can look and just see, oh, that's what ship is using all of them. So you're gonna see all that information there. Um, it's also going to tell you the data cost of each ship that's displayed there, and that's subtracted from your data supply because of the fact that you need the ship to register. And of course, you can also see how many of each ship are currently in use. If you don't want to use a type of ship, you can actually remove all the active ships that are deployed, and you can unregister it, allowing you to refund the research cost of that ship. That'd be funny. Let's see here. If you want to upgrade a ship, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to register the new version of that ship, then bring all of your active ships of that type to the shipyard to be refitted or rebuilt into the new ship type. Once all the ships have been refitted and none of the old ships exist, you can actually unregister the old ship if you want. You can't unregister a ship that's actively being used in your military, unfortunately. So you have to actually think about that. As for your ship roster here, to the right of your ship registry is going to be a ship roster, and that's going to show all the ships you have currently in service, and that means every single one, all of your fighters, all your rovers, everything. It's going to tell you information about each individual ship. You can name them to make them all unique, or you can let them be named in numerical order. That's up to you. You can also see the amount of crew every single ship has. It allows you to measure the health of every single ship and determine if you want to return them to the shipyard for repair or crew rotation or whatever you want. You can also see the amount of victories every ship has. You can see the exact day you built it. You can see the fleet it's currently a part of and the exact location of that ship. All that information about these ships is going to change after every battle or when a ship moves into new fleets or detached from other fleets. If your ship is low on crew, you can transfer crew between ships to keep them in service for longer. Stuff like that. To the right of that, you can have an area called your fleet roster. The fleet roster is basically where you're going to see every single fleet. You can name your fleets to whatever you want, and they're going to be shown on the map. Now, the exact location of every fleet is going to be shown, and it's going to make it easier to coordinate where you want to move your fleets. You can also see how many victories every fleet has. It's also going to tell you the total blocks of each fleet, so you can determine if you want to add or remove ships from fleets, so that way you can take advantage of the 200,000 limit per fleet. And of course, you can keep track of the performance impact of each fleet by doing that as well. So that's going to be pretty useful to know. Alright, time to get into the how to play section here. Now that we know a little bit of how everything works, my throat is already getting dry from all this. So much speaking. Now I know how people feel when they're doing lectures at a lecture hall. Now that you understand how everything works, we can get to actually playing the game. Once you confirm that once you've confirmed that you're participating, we're going to give you a sheet with all the information about your faction, okay? And it's going to tell you exactly like where you could type what you want to do for the next turn, all that stuff, right? This section of this document could go over all the mechanics and how things work. We're going to be covering these. We're going to cover the map. We're going to cover like starting fresh, upgrades and research, making your fleets, expansion or movement. We're going to go over combat, all this stuff. So on the map, we're going to have something like this here. It's going to be shared on the server with information such as your discovered planets. It's going to show the borders of existing factions, the locations of all your fleets, and the locations of structures within the area. If multiple regions have been discovered, then multiple maps are going to be shown. Every system on the map will have a number and letter guide on the top and left. And that's this here. You see like 1 through 11 and an A through K. You have the system so you can tell exactly where your ships are. And that means you can explain the location of specific tiles. It's kind of like the game Battleship, so you can tell where things are. When you want to describe construction or movement, you can use a number and letter system, or you can describe, planets or the system and the region and stuff like that. On the top here, it'll actually say what place it is. You can also use the planets for markers for movement, and yeah, it makes it easier to tell where you want to move things. Also worth noting that when you move, you can move like anywhere around you. It's not like a plus. You can move everywhere, even diagonally, like this. So you get a lot more free movement. Pretty neat, right? It makes it a lot easier to travel. Now we're going to go into starting fresh. So you're going to start at a portal that looks kind of like this, and that's going to be located somewhere in the middle of a starting system. And these portals will also appear in other systems, so it kind of depends on where that system is. you're going to be given a starting ship, like a little colony ship that has no weapons, it cannot fight, and it only has the ability to travel through space freely and very quickly. During this phase, you are completely immune to combat, but you will not be able to capture any enemy territory using this ship, okay? Now, this ship can move at 3 tiles per turn until you find a suitable planet you want to start on. Once you find the planet you want to start on, your ship is going to disappear. The planet is going to be marked as your own territory. Okay? That is going to be your official starting planet. If there are no planets available, you could just ask an existing faction to give you a planet. You're welcome to negotiate how that works, whether you want to be in alliances, trade agreements, or other things in exchange for giving you a place to start. You can do stuff like that. Or you can wait until a new portal opens up in an area where there's less people. That's up to you. Now, for the best start, try to avoid plain moons or planets that look really barren or empty. If you're unlucky, you're probably going to have to rely on trade to get some of the more rare resources. Once you have successfully established yourself on the planet, you're going to need to start producing resources and spending your operations. Then we're going to get into the upgrades and research part. Pretty much, yeah. You don't start on a planet anymore. You start in like a little portal and you have to explore and find your own planet. And you have to explore the map to find your planet. So it's basically first come, first serve. Everyone's going to be racing to take a planet. Okay. I don't know how many people are going to be fighting for Earth. There's going to be so many people going after it. It's like, no, I am the real Earth. No, you. It's going to be ridiculous. Okay. But yeah, you basically, once you find your planet you're going to be calling home for the start, you're going to need to start upgrading your planet and you're going to be spending some of your commodities for extra resources. You need to get as much research as possible in the early game so you can start researching technology for your first actual ship that can explore. It's a good idea to spend time finding a good planet because if you find a planet that's further away from everyone, that means you don't have to worry about battles as early. That means you can have more time to be by yourself while everyone else is fighting. Now, here's some tips, okay? If you want to get an exploration ship as early as possible, here's the things you want to get as early as possible. Level 2 armor plating, level 1 movements, level 1 mechanics, level 1 rotors, all this stuff here, level 3 space travel. You research all that, you could get a super basic starting ship that can explore the galaxy. Or at least the nearby systems. Um, yeah. With that, you can actually go in between planets, at minimum. But you can go further than that if you actually want to survive in a battle. Once you have everything researched and have enough materials, you need to make a place to start building your ships. Now, when you're making fleets, you're going to need to build a shipyard that can actually produce your fleets. First, you just need to find a good spot to build it. The best spots are going to be places where you can build your fleets easily, but also places where you can protect your shipyard and prevent it from being captured or destroyed. Once you've built yourself a shipyard, you can start building some ships and assigning them into different fleets. Now, something to note, you can have as many fleets as you want. And fleet stacking is also completely allowed. There's no rules against fleet stacking in this season, so feel free to throw out as many ships as you want. Just keep in mind that there are limits to how many resources you have. It starts to really become a problem over time. Now, once you have a fleet built, it's going to show up on the map, right? And you're going to be able to move your fleet you're going to move it over by 1 tile in any direction, including diagonally. And there's no limits to how many fleets you can make or how many of them you can move at once. You can move all your fleets simultaneously. Doesn't matter if you have 100, you can tell them all to move. That's going to be pretty useful. If you have multiple fleets close enough to each other, you can even move ships between the fleets or combine the fleets together. Or, split them apart. You can do stuff like that. So fleets aren't fixed anymore. Now, in order to expand your territory, you just need to move one of your fleets to other planets. If the planet's not claimed, then you automatically have control over the other planet. But if the planet is already claimed by another faction, then you need to claim every tile of the planet to fully capture it. And planets will take up between 1 and 9 tiles. So there's going to be like multi-episode skirmishes that'll happen over planetary like combat and trying to take planets. Now, if you have a structure and you want your fleet to use it, like let's say you want to like restock or repair some ships, right? You have to make your fleet land on that structure in order to use it. You can't just like sit next to it and say, I want to repair it. It's just like saying like what's it called? I want a crew rotation, but I'm still 100 kilometers away. Like you gotta actually like dock to the station before you can actually do stuff. Now, combat. If one of your fleets lands on the same tile or crosses paths with another fleet, then a battle will happen automatically. When a battle happens, both of those fleets are going to be spawned across from each other in the environment that's shown on that tile. Both of those fleets are going to engage in an automatic battle until either side is defeated. Now, any ships or fleets that are lost during the battle are going to be removed from your sheet or your document, right? The winning fleet will claim ownership of that tile and will continue moving after the battle. Now, combat doesn't always have to happen. If both you and enemy agree not to fight each other, then both of you will just pass by without any combat whatsoever. Now, if you have super weapons, then that doesn't really matter. Let's see. Can you have infinite fleets, by the way, or are fleets limited to like Season 2? No, you can have as many as you want. You can have all the fleets you want. Yeah, if you have a super weapon, you don't even really need a combat simulation most of the time, because you could just use the super weapon abilities to just completely delete ships, fleets, or even entire planets at a really heavy cost. Yeah, dedicated blockades are something you can do. Now let's go over rules. Okay, now that you understand somewhat how everything works, we're going to go over the rules, and here are some basic rules. I split them into 3 rules, or categories, shipbuilding rules, map rules, multi-faction rules, all these work. So the shipbuilding rules here, these are the rules that apply when you're building ships, and these are pretty obvious rules, okay? First one being, you can't just god mode your ship. You can't make it invincible or just other kinds of invulnerable, like, just don't do that, man. We're trying to have some fair and fun battles. Now, welding and grinding is going to be disabled, so you can't really print or repair your ships in the middle of a battle. Your ships will be repaired after battle, so automatically, because always might be spawning new ships, so you don't have to worry about that. In terms of scripts, don't use anything too laggy. Keep it simple. If you want to use like a mech script, that's fine. Those aren't really all that laggy. It depends on how you design your mech. If you want to use, I don't know, like a floor plan script on a supermassive ship that updates every half second, don't do that, please. I kind of want to have the computer work during these, so try not to use anything super laggy. Uh, don't use any infinite fuel exploits. Just use H2O2 generators like everyone else. Don't use too many subgrids that cause lag. We encourage you to use subgrids, but just make sure it doesn't hurt the performance. We want to have some fun here. Don't use, yeah, don't use clang drives, mass drives, or other exploit movement systems. Use thrusters, wheels, or legs like the rest of us. Um, Things that are surprisingly allowed. You're allowed to use jolts and other clang weapons as long as they cannot print. You're allowed to use scripted missiles as long as they do not print. Gravity weapons, like, you know, gravity cannons, gravity shotguns, whatever you want with that, rotor guns, that kind of stuff. You're allowed to use those as long as they don't infinitely make ammunition. Basically, you can have them pull ammunition from a storage on board your ship and just like reload with some subgrid system, like an arm or something. I don't know. You guys can come up with how that works. But that's fully allowed, just so you guys know. Now, here's the rules for the map itself. You can only move each fleet once per turn. Your fleets can only move one tile in any direction at a time. Now, your fleets can't use structures unless they're on the same tile as that structure. It doesn't make any sense to resupply a ship that hasn't arrived yet. You can only build structures that are inside your own territory borders. You can't build behind enemy lines unless you capture that territory. You cannot build more than one structure on the same tile, but you're allowed to build structures next to each other if you need them close to each other. Now, map borders are based on planet ownership. They're not going to be affected by the locations of your fleets, which means that if you make a fleet go towards a planet, there's a borderline where you're going to be behind enemy lines, and you cannot really supply them from nearby. That's going to be something that's going to be very interesting, since like some tiles are just going to be complete enemy territory no matter what until you take the nearest planet. You can only travel through portals if you have a jump drive on one of your ships. That's a pretty simple one. Now, you cannot jump to portals you don't own unless they are level 2 and belong to an ally. If a portal is level 3, new players or factions could spawn at it, but only allies can travel to it. Like enemy factions can't really jump to it unless they've completely died and need to respawn from scratch. Now, portals cannot be used to travel across different regions, but they can be used to travel from system to system in the same region. Now, if you want to travel to different regions, you have to use a jump gate. If a planet is destroyed, all the forces on that planet or in the orbit of that planet will be destroyed with it. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Now here's the rules that apply if you intend on using more than one faction. Now, your factions cannot be allied with each other. They have to always be at war or at least to be neutral or indifferent with each other. You're not allowed to spawn multiple factions in the same region. In fact, you're not allowed to spawn a faction in a region where one of your factions is already established. Um, you cannot trade between your factions either. Indirect trade is also not allowed. So if a player is facilitating an illegal trade, whether it's like, okay, well, I want to trade some commodities with my other faction, but the thing is, they can't trade with each other because that's illegal. So I'm going to give my resources to this person so that they could trade with that faction. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. I'm going to end up punishing all three factions. So that's the way that works. You got to be really careful about that. Now we're going to go over campaigns. Now here's the fun stuff. Let me go drink some water. There's a lot of speaking. I've been speaking for like an hour straight. There's going to be multiple campaigns and story quests throughout the season. Each campaign is going to have its own criteria and triggers that will need to happen before they can start. And of course, when a campaign actually starts, the lore is going to be dropped into the Discord along with a goal that needs to be completed in order to actually complete that quest. Now, if you complete a quest, you're going to be given rewards, including highly valuable singularity cores. And this is one of the only ways to get them. Some of these quests are going to have multiple objectives, with each objective given its own rewards. Some of these campaigns are going to have like multiple steps as progression, and that gives different players multiple rewards throughout the campaign, so different people can actually complete different steps. Now, some of these campaigns are going to include several like unique enemies or different dangers, and that makes it more difficult to complete. Now, some campaigns will have multiple options for completion, and they might not explicitly say it. Different options might give different rewards, where players that think outside the box might receive better rewards. It's worth noting that some quests are larger or longer than others, and multiple campaigns can be active at once. Some could require to travel across the entire galaxy, or some could be extremely vague, not really giving you any hints at all, or some of them could be entirely luck-based, so all kinds of stuff. There's going to be a dedicated channel on Discord that will give you information about all that stuff. Now then, Wheel of Misfortune. Who is ready to see like just how bad this can get if you're caught cheating? If you're ever caught cheating, this is gonna be like really bad. Now, if you're found to be cheating in any way, your faction is going to need to spin the Wheel of Misfortune, and all of the illegal ships will be removed and refunded, so get your resources back. Now, the wheel is going to determine how severe your punishment will be, and the punishments can vary from just a simple slap on the wrist to just near complete annihilation, so cheating is really discouraged. And here's just a list of just every punishment I've come up with in order from least to most severe. Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. I mean, I'll just let you guys read this. These get very brutal. Yeah, so if you're caught cheating, the consequences are very dire. Like it could remove months of progress. So really, really try not to be cheeky with your ship designs. Like if you're registering that, just register it properly. Double check it, triple check it, do what you need to do. It really isn't hard to register. Of course, over here we have a list of all the mods here. So, weapons building, other and optional mods. A lot of interesting things here, right? All this stuff. There is a channel in the Discord that actually gives you all these mods, I think. That's everything that's on this document. Now, let's see. How do I want to do this? If a dying faction cheats, they continue dying even worse. If a faction dies out, they'll have to respawn somewhere else. If they want to respawn, that is. Yeah, if your faction is losing really badly and is losing a lot of territory and you're caught cheating, then the things are so much worse because then you have to deal with one of the punishments, even if you're like receding very heavily. That just means that all the people fighting you have an easier time. Let's see, where do I want to begin? Do you guys want to look at the tech tree, or do you guys want to look at the actual sheets? What do you guys prefer, tech tree or just looking at these sheets up here? Tech tree, all right. Let's go take a look. So here is the tech tree, okay? Now, here's what's interesting. Everything on the tech tree is actually hidden until you get to it. Let's just slowly scroll out just so you guys can see. This is the initial tech tree. You guys start from this green area here, and you can basically research into all these different things here. And when you get to one of these, it unlocks this, so you can actually see what that is as you keep going. So you can research different things. So you can see from the start here, you have access to armor plating, logic and technology, movement, power, and fuel. Then over here, weapons, right? And this tech tree, this is something that's visible for everyone. So if you unlock like something, that's going to be visible to everyone. So basically, think of it as like a shared kind of tech tree. The technology is per person, but the things that you are looking at is what's there. Now, when you are researching your weapons over here, your different types of weapons, when you unlock a type of weapon, it unlocks this other tech tree up here, this bigger one. Let's see. What happens if I register a ship with a weapon I did not have access to yet? You can't register a ship you don't have a... Yeah, you can't register a ship if you don't have the weapon. Because the weapon is part of the registration process. This is another reason why I told you guys to make shells. Or shells of ships. It makes it a lot easier. Now, yeah, let's remember the Gatling gun example? Let's say you research like a Gatling gun on here, right? Once you unlock the Gatling gun technology, you're gonna go find the Gatling guns over here, right? And then as you level that up, this is gonna slowly go up on revealing new weapons that you can use at different levels. And that keeps going all the way up to its maximum level. And you can see there's quite a few different like weapon types, and you can see some of these go all the way up to the top. Now, you're probably wondering about all these different colors. These colors here actually represent like different tiers. So these are different like thresholds. And that actually applies for some of the stuff down here as well. But yeah, there's a lot here. It gets crazy. But that's basically your sneak peek at the tech tree. I will put this tech tree on the Discord in the respective tech tree channel after this, so you guys can take a closer look at it. But the actual things on the tech tree, like behind these locked areas, will be revealed once you actually do stuff. There's no such thing as pre-registration, unfortunately. You have to register your ships like during the thing because your ships actually cost stuff to register. There is a price to register your ships, and I'm actually going to show you how that works. So we're going to go over here to the Season 3 weapons sheet. This is the registration sheet you guys will have access to. And just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this is, look at this. Look at all these weapons. 900 weapons. That's a lot of weapons. Is the Starfall considered a super weapon or a researchable weapon? That's the neat thing. Because of the way the new season works, a lot of the weapons that were considered super weapons or just illegal weapons in the last season are no longer considered super weapons. Now, super weapons are weapons that do over 1 billion damage. So the Starfall actually is not a super weapon. That doesn't mean it's like cheap though. It's still going to be expensive to research. And super weapons are also researchable as well. You have to go up the tech tree to be able to unlock them. But yeah, here you can see the DPS of your weapons. Like let's say you're looking for a specific weapon. You can find, let's actually look at the Starfall as an example. So we're going to go here, we're going to search by mod. So we can just clear all, we're going to go over and look for, Eric's Weapon Enterprises Volume 1 here. And we're going to go through here, right? You can see all the different stats here. Pretty neat, right? How you could just do this. So you can scroll to the right and you can actually pick what type of weapon you want to look for. So let's say we want to find, I don't know, let's say we want to find a missile type weapon. So let's click OK. And here we can find the Starfall rocket artillery. You can find all the information about it here. Right here you can see its DPS, 97 million. You can see its range of 15 kilometers, its aim type, right? Numbers and stuff you guys probably won't understand because there's a lot here that's like hidden in the modifiers tab. Unlocked. Yeah, here you can see what type of weapon it is. Over here you can see how many barrels it has, how the width, the grid size, and here you can see the price of the weapons. This is the price. Like, yeah, weapons can get really expensive. And something you might have noticed, there's a crew requirement per weapon. There's a slap in the face for all of you guys. Weapons have a crew requirement per weapon. That means that you guys are going to have to design your ships to have enough crew to hold the weapons that you're planning on putting on them. So yeah, that's fun. And just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this stuff can get, let's actually just like select all here, right? Just so you can see everything. Let's go over to the prices here. You can see the crew requirements are just around the place. Some of them don't even cost like they cost like what, like one crew member. Some of these other ones cost like a bunch. Some of them cost hundreds. It depends on the weapon and how powerful the weapon is. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into factoring exactly how many crew are needed per weapon, but it really varies on the weapon itself. So this is really like a huge curveball for you guys. Like, yeah, crew is something that's actually really important. As for super weapons, here's all the super weapons. You can see they're really high tier over here. And you can see they also have requirements as well. Crew requirements over here. Price. This is the price in what's it called? Singularity cores here. While the other one is the price of munitions. You can see the DPS in billions here. It gets ridiculous. Yeesh. It's quite a lot. Now, let's go into the calculations just to show you guys all the stuff we've talked about earlier in the video here. This is the calculations area here. This is all it is. Just this tiny little thing. You type in whatever weapons you wanted and you have all this. It's quite neat, right? All your materials here, you have all your stats here, you have some notes here that give you some information about what stuff is, right? Wave motion guns, as of the latest update, I believe like a few weeks ago, are not super weapons anymore. The damage they do is actually decreased. So they no longer do over 1 billion damage. They were super weapons until that changed. I know this stuff can change if weapon mods update, so yeah, keep that in mind. Now here's this information here. Let's see here. Let's actually go ahead and get an example. Does anyone have a ship design that they want to use as an example here? That's really fun. Hey Steel, do you have any ships you want to use an example here, just so people understand like what's going on here? We're not gonna like show the actual ship. We just want to show like the stats for like how this works and how easy it is. I'm just gonna let them load up Space Engineer so you can go ahead and grab a design. Cool. Just go into a world with instant projector and just we're just gonna get the stats for the ships. Okay, we're just gonna make us some stats as we go. And this is gonna be really cool, just so you guys can see exactly how this works. Okay, so of course you have all this stuff, there's red markers here that are telling you like, stuff isn't working. The orange is what you need to modify, right? You can see here, everything here says false because, there's nothing here. But of course I'm missing data, so that's true, right? Got some information here, armor density here. What's it called? If your armor density is over 100%, that means you have more armor than if your ship was made entirely of light armor. That is, if your ship is made of mostly light armor, that armor density is actually going to be a bit lower because of the fact that your components like hydrogen tanks or batteries, reactors, those other things, your weapons, they don't yeah. So that basically takes that into account, stuff like that. That's pretty neat. If you go to heavy armor, it gets significantly higher. Firepower to armor ratios, all that stuff here. Let's see, message from system. You got comments based on materials, your comments based on block counts, your comments based on weapons, or your comments based on crew. Because you have no materials, it's not the comment and block count. It's a bit snarky, but it's basically saying like, yeah, your ship is clearly invisible because it doesn't have a block count. Weapons, yeah, this has almost no firepower. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have any firepower at all. And for crew, yeah, at least add a remote control if it's meant to be a drone. So that lets us know that I need at least one crew thing. As for valid crew blocks, there's quite a few things that count as crew blocks. They include the following: cockpits, couches, cryo chambers, desks, emoticon controllers, passenger seats, programmable blocks, remote controls, beds, target dummies, and toilets. All of those count as crew blocks. Yeah, ideally, you want to put them all in a group so it's easier to tell how many crew you have. It also makes it easier because you can actually see how many crew you're missing after a battle. All right, so we're gonna do this in order based on what it says from the message in the system. So, why emoticon controllers? So, emoticon controllers are, because remember earlier I mentioned your faction could be literally anything. So, your faction can be a human faction, it can be like any race you want, it could even be a machine faction. So you can say in your lore that an emoticon controller is basically a computer, like a you know uh yeah, you can say it's like a computer, like one processor for that thing. So you could argue that if your ships are all like run by a machine faction, you need a certain amount of computational power in order to make the ships work. So instead of crew, it's basically like computer power or something like that. You can come up with like your details or whatever. Let's say that it's like an organic faction. Like let's say you're playing as like a creature faction. You could say like maybe it's like a measure of like brain power or something like that, like how smart the creature is. Or I don't know. There's so many different ways you can do this. It doesn't have to be exactly how it is here. It is all roleplay, so you can come up with however you want. And this is all basically just to run however you guys want to make it run. There's so many possibilities. Yeah, pretty much. You guys can pretty much just tune this to however you want your factions to work. All right, steel. Once you get a ship onto a projector, can you tell me how many steel plates it has? In the meantime, I will go ahead and show you guys the star map. So here it goes. Let's go over here. It has 16207, right? And once we do this, watch what happens. The message has changed. So now it's going to say, is your ship invisible? Put in your block count. And of course, in terms of materials, it says this is a very heavily armored ship. Okay, so let's see here. What is the block count of your ship? There we go. So now you can see some stuff is changing around here. You can see the armor density has changed here. You have a 104.73% armor density. Pretty neat. So in terms of materials, it's a nice lightweight ship. It's going to assume it's either a fighter or a drone. We see over here the message from the system. Yeah, no weapons. We're not going to let you fly into hostile space without at least some kind of protection. So I don't know. Pick a weapon. What kind of weapon? Should we throw some interior turrets or something on it? Yeah, let's go grab interior turrets here. Let's say this tiny little drone has like two interior turrets on it. If we go back over here, there we go. How's it gonna fly without anyone driving it? Add some crew. So we see super lightweight weapons is enough to protect you, but it won't do much in battle, pretty sure. Now how many crew blocks does it have? Just make an estimate. Also, firepower to armor ratio is 17.58%. So it is giving you this stuff in real time. It's also counting your maximum weapons range is 0.04, and the minimum weapons range right now is 0. Interesting. How many? 5? Okay, so let's do 5, right? And you can see there's not enough people to fly it. There's very few crew on the ship, which is perfect if it's a smaller ship or a fighter. But you can see we don't have enough crew. Why? Well, if we look here, functional crew for large grid is 7. You have a functional crew for small grid of 5. You see, the functional crew for large grid is 7. let's actually see why. So interior turret needs about 2.5 people per. So that probably adds up. See, how much does a Gatling gun have? A large Gatling gun costs 7.5 people. Well, we're assuming this is large grid because it's yeah, we're assuming this is large grid because you need crew to control your weapons, but you also need crew to maintain your ship, like engineers, and you also need like people on board that are like managing systems and doing stuff. So there is a crew capacity that is being used specifically for the block count of your ship, and there's a crew capacity that's being used for your weapon systems. And those weapon systems, that crew capacity is not only being used for aiming, it's being used for managing weapons, maintenance, and other things like that. So for those interior turrets, it's 2.5 because most likely you're probably having someone that's aiming the turret, you're having someone that's feeding the ammunition, and then you have like half a person that's like fixing it on the fly. So that's the way that works basically. So you can see that's pretty interesting. Let's put it to 7 now. So we put 7. There we go. Now it says all systems are green. Your ship has passed inspection. Once you get this message, you know that your ship is fully ready to be registered. As long as everything in here is accurate, that's all you need. That was it. Spend your weapons, throw in these things, and you're all done. As long as everything is green, you're good. How do you specify it's a static or turreted weapon? Um, so when you are here, right, you can see here you have Gatling gun and you have Gatling turret. You have stuff like that. It will also say large and small grid. If you're unsure, then you can actually go over here, right? And you see, where is it? Aim type, this section here. Everything that says 0.8 is a fixed weapon. Everything that says 1 is a turret, and everything that says 2 is a homing weapon. So yeah, these two railguns are fixed. These three here are turrets, and of course all the vanilla rocket launchers, because we're using a replace vanilla weapons, they are actually homing. So that's good to know. But yeah, that's basically everything you need to know for how to make this part work. It's actually pretty neat. I'm gonna go ahead and reset the sheet, which is actually really easy to do. Just do this. There we go. So now we're gonna go over to the test player sheet. This is what you guys are gonna have access to. Every single one of you that's participating, or just has your own faction, each faction is gonna get this sheet. And this is going to tell you all the information you need to know. So here you can see all your resources, right? Just whatever you have to start with, right? You see your stats here, right? All this stuff. But here you can see your research, all this stuff, right? See what level it is, the maximum levels for stuff. You can see the price, uh, and the next level, how much it costs, right? But you can see your commodity trading that was mentioned earlier. You can see your super weapons here. Over here is the green area we talked about before. Everything you type out here, whatever you want to type, this is not shown to the game masters. Only whatever you type in here is shown, right? If you go over here, this is your ship registry. It tells you all this stuff. So you have your ship type, and it goes through all this, right? All the cost for your ship, the data cost of that ship, all this stuff. Yeah. Here's the ship roster. It's because it has a high fall off. The longer the range, the less damage it does. So at point blank range, the damage is extremely good. But if something that's far away, it does less and less damage. You learn more every day. Your ship roster here, you can see all the different like ships you have here, locations, all stuff, all this information. This is all you're gonna have access to. This is all working here. Your fleet roster. Here's something interesting. So let's say you're gonna be cheeky and you try to cheat here. Let's say, I'm gonna be sneaky and I'm gonna type here that I have 1 million crew, right? There we go. They'll never know what happened. If you try to edit any of this stuff, it will break. Because you can't actually edit any of this information here. All the stuff that's in here is actually being loaded from a different sheet. And that's actually why this is really fun and neat. The only thing you can actually edit that will actually like not break anything is here in the green, or anything that's like not typed directly in the way of anything else. And that's because I use this sheet over here to actually live update everyone else's sheets. So over here, you can see this is the sheet that I see for you guys, and I can actually edit your stuff here. Okay? You can see I can update your levels and everything. I can edit all this stuff. And of course, what you type in, let's say, I want to move right, right? There it is. See? Pretty neat, right? It updates in real time. So everything that I update here, it will update on the other sheet. So let's say, like, I don't know, let's say total battles won. You won 20 battles, right? So if you go over here, you've won 20 battles. You can't edit any of that stuff, but you'll see it in real time as I update it. And that's really cool. And the best part is it's completely private. Only you can see your sheet. And anything you type here, let's say is like, what's it called? Let's say you're right here and you say, I want to, or let's say plans, I don't know, destroy Mars. You could type that there. Where is it? Yeah, I'll never know what your plans are, basically. Yeah, there will be a copy of this sheet made available for every single person that is participating in the season. Right now, there's just this one because this is an example sheet to make sure everything works, but I will be making one for each person, and I'm actually going to have it here. Okay, this is pretty neat. And of course, you can see all the stuff here, right? Your stats over here, your ship registry, all this stuff. Basically, as I edit it here, it's going to go ahead and it's going to update on your sheets. And anything you type outside of the green area, I will not be able to see. So you guys can make your own private plans on the outside. It's like taking notes in D&D. You have so much you can do with that. And that's really neat. Now, someone mentioned how many operations you get per week. So let's actually just go over here and let's say, I don't know, week 2. Yeah, you get 3 per week. So I just update that. Pretty nice, isn't it? And of course, here you can see the levels and stuff. So as I type things here, let's say we'll update this to 10, right? You can see 2, 3, 4, 5, stuff like that. Also, if you're wondering why the cost isn't like 900, like I said before, it's because this is like a total cost kind of thing. So it's 800 plus the 100 that's here. So it's like if you actually look here, right? Say here your research data. So if I type 1 here, it's subtracting 100. If I type 2 here, right? It's subtracting that amount there. It's going more and more and more. I'm already broke. But yeah, all this stuff does update in real time, which is super cool. So all this information here will update and it'll show you exactly what is going on, which is awesome. Of course, I can also keep track of stuff that's traded here as well, which is pretty neat. There's a lot that can be done here. Okay, and now I'm gonna go ahead and look at the star map for next season. This is the star map for next season. It might not look as big as the last season, but I can guarantee it is a lot bigger. Because remember the examples from before, this here, this is where you guys are going to start at the very, very beginning. You guys have the option to start in the inner soul system or the home system here. And you guys are going to be able to travel around. Now, when you get to the end here, you can actually travel across to the other system. If you go up, you can go into another system and open up that system for exploration, which means that if you start, you can make a run all the way up here and try to figure out what's up here. But if you stay down here, you could just take these worlds and continue to, like, get an early head start, however you guys want. There are many different ways you guys can do stuff here, and, you can start planning and scheming. There is a whole lot to cover, or just, yeah, there's a lot. I think that's about it in terms of our introduction to the season three. Is there anything that you guys have any questions about? Are there any questions, or are we all good? No questions? I mean, that was a lot to cover. So I'm surprised there's no questions at all. All right, if there are any questions that you guys have, make sure to bring them up to me in the Discord. I'll go ahead and join the Discord voice chat after this. And yeah, have fun with the season. I look forward to seeing what you guys do. This is gonna be insane. There is so much that you guys can do. And of course, for anyone here that is not a part of the season, anyone is welcome to join at any time throughout the season. You guys can join the Discord through the link in the description. And of course, this season is fully just open to join. Have fun and take care.